Parshas Ki Sovo, and the question is, how can we be zoche to a life of brocha? So this share has been dedicated l'zchus all the families affected by the terrible terrorist attack in Monday night Israel. Hashem should give them koach and gvura to come through it all, and we should only hear of simchas and mesuras tevis and all of Klal Yisrael. So in this week's Medrash we read the Parsha of Berocha. Now, we live in a world where unfortunately there are all too many reminders of the Berocha, of the application of suffering, of challenge, and I want to use this share to go through the psukim and show a pathway to a life of brocha, something that is in reach to all of us. So I want to begin with a question. What is the value in reading the Berocha? Why is it that we have a halacha and we have a Parsha of the Torah that we have to learn called the Berocha? What are we going to gain from learning the Berocha? It's obviously not meant to scare us in any way. So what's the point? The Gemara in Megillah, Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, tells us that it is by design that Davka before Rosh Hashanah we learn the Berocha. Tanya, Reb Shimon Loza Omer, Ezra Tikkun Lem Yisrael. So Ezra was second Klal Yisrael that they should read the Klolos in Teras Kohanim in the end of Vayikra before Shavuos, and those of our Parsha Ki Sovo before Rosh Hashanah. My time Amar Abai v'Tev Resh Lakish. Kedei shetichle hashana v'kidul yiseha. In order to end the year and its klolos. In other words, we read the Berocha and we've ended the klolos of the year. Halavai. Just by reading the Berocha we can end all the suffering? How could that possibly work? So the Tiferet Shlomo says, we're all familiar with the concept of Neshalma Porim Savasenu. We don't have a Beis Hamikdash nowadays, so when we read the parashas of the Korbanos, it is as though we've offered up the Korbanos. Says that the Tiferet Shlomo in a similar way, when we read the Parsha of the Berocha, Hine yotzonu yedei chayvasenu b'kriyas hadvarim ha'eleh umemela yishafchu lanu kulam lebrocha. By reading the psukim of the Berocha, we turn around our situation from being klala to bracha, because what's happened is we've read the Berocha. So if we've read it, then it can be considered as though it has been fulfilled, and there's no need anymore, as it were, for Hashem to bring into actuality any of the remaining Berocha. So the actual reading of the psukim of the Parsha of the Berocha is meaningful. And when we listen this week, there's Hashem on Shabbos, and we should have in mind the idea that we're listening to the Berocha because we want that the reading and the listening of the Berocha should be instead of any outstanding klala that Hashem still feels the need to fulfill. That's the first point. Now Rav Shimshon Hirsch contrasts the two parashas of Berocha that we have, as I say, one in Parshas Berocha and one in Ki Sovo. So the Gemara already says this difference, that in the Berocha and Berocha, it is written b'loshen rabim. It is written in the language of plural language, whereas the one in this week's Medrash in Ki Sovo is written and spoken to the individual. What's the significance of that difference? So Rav Shimshon Hirsch explains. In Berocha, the Parsha is talking to Klolos Yisrael. It's talking to the entire nation. It's talking to the state of the nation. It's talking to a Klal Yisrael who as a nation would be underperforming, to put it politely. To them, the Parsha of the Torah tells us, unfortunately, misbehave, there's going to be a Berocha. But in Ki Sovo, which is part of Sefer Dvarim, which Rav Shimshon Hirsch points out is also known as Mishnah Torah, because it's the time when we're going to review, as it were, the Torah. The focus here in this week's Medrash is on the individual. And therefore, when we have the Berocha written in the Torah, it's written talking to the individual. Why? Says Rav Hirsch, because the Torah wants every individual to hear the Berocha and to understand their responsibility to improve as an individual. And it's actually interesting because it very nicely aligns with the nature of the Yom Tov that the Berocha comes before. So we said from the Gemara Megillah that before Shavuos we learn the Teicha of Berocha. Before Rosh Hashanah we learn the Teicha of Ki Sovo. So think about it. Shavuos, when we accepted the Torah, who accepted the Torah? Klal Yisrael, as one unit. K'ish echad b'leiv echad. It was an event for the Klolos Yisrael, for the entirety, for the entity of Klal Yisrael. So the Teicha that precedes that talks to the same entity, talks to the same one single broad unit that is Klal Yisrael. But Rosh Hashanah, as we know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges every person and plans for every individual a coming year befitting for them. So Rosh Hashanah really is a Yom Tov, is a time when the Rebbeinu Shalom is focusing on the individual. So the Teicha that precedes Rosh Hashanah is a Teicha that talks in the language of the individual. So you see how Rav Hirsch's differentiation actually aligns nicely with the theme of the Yom Tovim, Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah. But Rav Hirsch makes a very crucial point. Yes, the Teicha is talking in this week's Sedra to the individual. And yes, we want, first of all, for every individual to reflect and to take responsibility for their own actions and for their own improvement, own self-work, of course. But says Rav Hirsch, part of that is the individual realizing the importance of being a part of Klal Yisrael. Kol Yisrael arevim zelozeh. Every Yid belongs in connection to another Yid. We're all responsible for one another. Says Rav Hirsch, it is part and parcel of being an individual Yid, taking your responsibility seriously, to realize that you have to care about and you have to take interest in and you have to care for other Yidden in the same way. And this leads us very nicely to a very famous vort on the words of the Torah. The Torah in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah, Tov Kuf Pei Aleph. And the Torah contrasts what happens in Minhagos Shel Olam, in the way of the world out there. When a person has a very big judgment to face, says the Torah, a person would customarily dress in black, and they would let their hair grow long, they wouldn't cut their nails, they would almost be overwhelmed with the seriousness and the stress and the anxiety around the judgment that they're facing. They almost wouldn't really look after themselves. Says the Torah, Aval Yisrael Einon Kain. But Klal Yisrael don't behave like that. Comes Rosh Hashanah. Loifshim Levonim. We wear white clothes, we wear a kittel, many of us. And we megalchim zakona, we're happy to have haircuts Erev Rosh Hashanah. We cut our nails Erev Rosh Hashanah. V'oichlin v'shoisin u'smeichin. And we eat, we drink, we're happy, we celebrate Rosh Hashanah with Yom Tov meals, with a spirit, with an energy, with a positivity. Why, says the Torah? Why is the difference? Says the Torah, very astonishing words. Lefi sheyoidin sha'HaKadosh Baruch Hu ya'asa la'hem nes. Because Klal Yisrael know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will perform a miracle. And what this means, the Torah is implying, is that there's no need on Rosh Hashanah to be all that worried. We celebrate Rosh Hashanah, it's fine, it's a Yom Tov. Why? Because we know HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to do a miracle, we'll be fine. So Rav Chatzkel Levenstein brings on the Altar of Kelm in the Sefer Yechezkel and Elul. He says, how can it possibly be that we're going to be so cavalier about such an awesome day? You know HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to do a miracle. That's not an attitude that a Yid normally takes. How could the Torah possibly mean that a Yid can come to Rosh Hashanah and not bother with the seriousness of the day, because anyway it's going to be fine? That's not what we do. That's not how we conduct ourselves. We take davening seriously. We take the day seriously. What does the Torah mean? That's what the Altar of Kelm posed as a question. And the Altar of Kelm answered that there's a difference between the Rabbim and the Yochid. There's a difference between the entirety of Klal Yisrael and the individual. When it comes to the entity of Klal Yisrael, on that, we know there's going to be a nest. In other words, Klal Yisrael's survival is guaranteed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has said so multiple times in Tanakh. Klal Yisrael is here to stay. Klal Yisrael as a unit, Klal Yisrael as an entity, Klal Yisrael as the existence of Klal Yisrael, don't worry. We'll always be here. We'll get through another year. It's good. You can be confident Hashem will do what it takes, even in this, to make sure Klal Yisrael survive. But the individual, that's a really different story. On the individual, there's a judgment call. Baruch has to decide what's the best plan for the next year. What do we think this person's going to actually do next year? And therefore, what type of year should he have? That's how the Alter of Kelm explains these words of the Torah. That Klal Yisrael can be confident that they will have a miracle done for that to guarantee their survival. But says the Alter of Kelm, importantly, therefore it's incumbent on each individual to put themselves as part of the tzibur. If you put yourself as part of the tzibur, and how does one do that, says the Alter of Kelm, at the very least, you think about others, you daven for others, you behave in a way that you see yourself not just as an individual, but as part of a tzibur. If you do so, says the Alter of Kelm, then you're including yourself in the very promise of the survival of Klal Yisrael. If you put effort into over Rosh Hashanah, not just thinking about yourself, but you think about your neighbor, you think about your friend, you think about other people. You daven for Klal Yisrael as a whole. You're including yourself in the tzibur, then you're including yourself also in that guaranteedness that the tzibur, the Klal Yisrael, don't have to worry at all when it comes to the outcome of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so far, what we've said is that the reading of the Teichacha is effective. And by listening to the laning of the Teichacha, we can substitute our listening to the reading of the Teichacha for actualization of the Teichacha Rachman al-Islam. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu deems that fit and necessary, we can say, look Hashem, we're listening to the Teichacha instead. Surely that should count instead. That's the first point we said. The second point we said is that the Parsha in Ki Sovo of the Teichacha is talking to us as individuals, for each of us to look inside, look within, and try to improve as individuals. But equally, Rav Hirsch points out, part of being the responsible individual Jew is to appreciate and realize that you don't just think about yourself, you think about your friend and you're part of a Klal Yisrael, which led us nicely to an approach which is beneficial for us ahead of Rosh Hashanah, that we must put it into our mind and our focus to care about other people, to daven for other people, to see ourselves as part of the tzibur. And if a person behaves and sees themselves as part of the tzibur, then through that we can be zeicha on Rosh Hashanah. So this is all good and well. But I want to focus on another aspect of the Teichacha, in that, how does one turn the Teichacha into bracha? And this is a point that the Alter of Slabodka, in his Sefer Orat Sofon, under the title of the Maima Oimek Rachmei Hashem, he says as follows: we read the Parsha of the Teichacha before Rosh Hashanah, Ulam alidei ha'hakara b'chesed HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'alidei tefiloseinu u'bitchaynenu b'koicheinu l'hafech es ha'kloles lebrachos v'shehei nichazko esonu. Says the Alter Slabodka, it is true that sometimes we, as people, as individuals, will face difficulties in life. Sometimes people go through very, very hard stuff. Sometimes the Teichacha, as I said, in this week's Sedra, doesn't talk about the whole of Klal Yisrael going through suffering. It's talking about individuals, and unfortunately, individuals go through suffering. We know that. But says the Alter Slabodka, if you want to turn the situation around, you want to turn the situation around from Klala to Bracha, we know as Yidden that we have the power of Tefillah and we have the power of Bitochen. And it is a Yid who conducts themselves in this way, where they allow themselves to have the hope and the resilience because they know that with Tefillah and with Bitochen they can turn it around. Such a person will have his life turned around, says the Alter Slabodka. And the truth is, in these very words, there's a whole separate shir right there. But it's very simple. A person shouldn't get scared off, shouldn't be fearful of consequences. The Teichacha shouldn't worry us at all. The opposite. Whatever's going on in our life, whatever's going on in a person's life, even if it's difficult, they should take comfort in the fact that we have in our cupboard full of weapons, we have tefillah, we have bitochen, we're able to have hope because we know that we, by davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we can turn it around. That's the first point that Alter Slabodka says. Then he says something which I appreciate is slightly challenging, But if a person can somehow try and get in touch with this, it can be really, really effective. Says the Alta Slabotka. Again, we're talking about someone who's in a difficult situation. Someone who feels that, the suffering of the Teichacha is kind of happening in his life to some degree. Says the Alta Slabotka, a Yid should be able to accept all that's going on in his life with love, with joy. First of all, says the Alta Mishum Shebozeh Mismali Rotzen Habayir, because through this he fulfills Rotzen Habayir. In other words, through this he brings a certain pleasure to HaKadosh Baruch Hu of filling his will. And this attitude alone can turn around the situation for the better. There's nothing like this. A person who's able in the difficulty, during the difficult situation, to turn around, not to focus on that which is wrong, not to focus on that which is not going well, but to actually find the kindness of Hashem even in his life, to find the positive, to seek the positive. That attitude of being able to live b'simcha despite all is a gewaldige zchus and will turn around his situation in the bracha. Yes, it's a big madrega, but I think it's within reach to touch that at least on some level. So that's fine and well in terms of turning around klolos to brachas. But Rabbi say I want to go a stage further. I want to show you how close we are to a life of bracha. Before the psukim of the Teichacha, the Torah introduces with a load of psukim of brachas. And the Torah introduces the brachas with the following two psukim. V'hoya, Chav Ches Aleph, v'hoya. Im shamoya tishma b'koil Hashem Elokecha. If you listen to the voice of Hashem your God, lishmoir la'asos is called mitzvosov. To God, to keep all the mitzvahs of the Torah. Asher anochi mitzvah chayim, which I'm commanding you today. Unasonecha Hashem Elokecha elyon hakol goyim. Hashem will make you high above all the nations of the world. The nations of the world will look up to us. Okay. Not only that, says the next pasuk. All of these brachas will come to you and they will reach you. Because you listened to the voice of Hashem your God. These psukim are so powerful. We're always looking for brachas. Yidden like to live a good gebenchte life. Who doesn't? Yidden fly around halfway around the world looking for the tzaddik, looking for the keva, looking for the skula. We know the drill. But what does the Torah tell us? The Torah tells us you want brachas. If you listen to the voice of Hashem, if you keep the mitzvahs of the Torah, the brachas will come. That's it? That's all you're asking of me? Just to be a good from Jew? Yes. And there's a very important message here. That because we're so used to doing the things we do, we forget how remarkable we are for doing them. We don't realize the significance of us keeping Torah and mitzvahs. Especially in this time of year, where people's thoughts will often go to where they need to improve and what they need to do better and where they want to improve. And it's a good thing to think like that sometimes. But it's also important that we give thought, importance and value and appreciate the daily grind of a Torah Jew. The keeping of Torah and mitzvahs and how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu really respects and appreciates that. We've got to see the value of us being shomrei Torah and mitzvahs. The Medrash Tanchuma Shoftim relates the following incident. There's a story with Rabbi Yannai and Rabbi Yochanan, who were sitting in Tiberia. And near them were two astrologers, clearly non-Jewish astrologers. And the four of them observed another two, Yidden, going out to work. So leaving their house, going to work. The two astrologers proclaimed about those other two Yidden that were going to work. Those two guys, they're going out to work, but they're never going to make it there. Hanochosh sorifon. The snake's going to come and take care of them. They're going to die. This was the proclamation of the astrologers. Now Rabbi Yana and Rabbi Yochanan were sitting nearby, and they heard this. What did they do, says the Medrash? They went to check out. They went to see what happened to those two Yidden in the end. And they saw. They went to work, stayed alive, they were fine. So Rabbi Yana and Rabbi Yochanan came back to the astrologers, and they said, you guys, didn't you say that those two Jews were going to go out and not come back because they were going to die? And the astrologers said, yes, you're right, we did say that. So they said, but they're still alive. It's interesting, the Medrash says, Hoyu ha-astrologin mabitin bahem. In reaction, they were like looking at them. They were like, oh, okay, interesting. The astrologers go over to those two Yidden, and they ask them, Ma asisem bayoim hazeh? What did you do today? In other words, they're trying to work out what went wrong. They had this astrology, the understanding, they knew what was going to be. Omru lohem, the two Yidden answered back, Lo yosinu dovo, we didn't do anything. Elo kashem shehoyinu limudin lasos. We did whatever we normally did. Korinu es Shema v'hispalalnu. We read Shema and we davened. We didn't do anything major. The astrologers said, Ein divrei ha-astrology miskayim bochem. All our astrology is not going to work for you guys. There's a lot to pick from this story, but I want to pick this one line. Lo yosinu dovo. We didn't do anything. Elo kashem she'ayinu limudim lasos. We did our regular thing. We davened. We said Krishma. No big deal. No, says the Medrash. You davened. You said Krishma. You did your daily grind as a Torah Jew. That's awesome, and it saved their life. Rabbi say, how many times does a person go to bed at night and think to themselves, what have I done of value already today? How often do thoughts of disencouragement enter our mind? Well, I'm not such a big guy, I'm not such a big deal. What have I done already? What am I worth already? It's a big mistake. These two Yidden in the story of the Medrash also didn't fully appreciate the extraordinary value of their daily activity. We didn't do anything. But they did their daily grind as Torah Jews, and that is amazing, and that is awesome, and that is full of bracha. We have to see the value in our position and in our life of Shomri, Torah, or Mitzvahs. In a few short weeks, we'll be standing and davening multiple times. And we'll be telling HaKadosh Baruch Hu our desire of Meloich al kol ha'olam kulei b'chvodecha. Ribono shel olam, we want you to be recognized as king over the whole world. The whole world should know HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not just us. Who are we already? We're less than 1% of the whole world population. How lucky we are that we are in a position of knowing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of doing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will every single day. How special we are. Ashreinu ma'atov chalkeinu. You want brachas in your life? Do Torah mitzvahs. Focus on doing Torah mitzvahs properly, to the best of your ability. Ubo alecha kol habrachas. Now, what exactly that looks like, every individual will be on their own journey, of course. And everyone will have their own growth path and what they need to improve and what they need to tighten up, of course. But fundamentally, at the core, you want a life of bracha? Keep at it. There are a few considerations that the Malbim reads into these psukim, which I want to share with you because they can serve as pointers to us. For someone who wants to tighten up the Shmiras HaTorah HaMitzvahs, to get these brachas. The Malbim points to the words of Hayim Shomei Tishma. There's a double expression. And he says what that does is it teaches us that you don't just listen to the mitzvahs of the Torah, but you really, really listen. What does that mean, says the Malbim? We need to be focused as Torah Jews, we need to be focused on moving forward, on growth. Don't settle for where you are now. Have ambition, have ideals, have growth mindset. Really want to move. At the same time, of course, don't be discouraged. Don't move fast. Don't push yourself beyond your normal speed. pat yourself on the back for all the things you've done well. Value where you are now, of course. But the mindset should be, I want to keep moving, I want to keep growing. That's the first point the Malbim says. And the second point he says is, Gam ha-mitzvahs shekosha ala odom lekaimom b'shvil ha-toirach echesorin kis yishtadl la'asoisom. A person's attitude to Torah mitzvahs should be, even with those mitzvahs that are hard for a person to keep. And people have different challenges. Some people's challenge, says the Malbim, might be, it's just difficult. Some people's challenge might be because of loss of money. For some people, getting up early in the morning is hard. For other people, using their time the rest of the day or the evening is hard. Everyone has a different challenge, and every person will know what those challenges are. Shomer Torah mitzvahs is someone who lives in a way that firstly focuses on improving, on growth, on trying to do better, but also is willing to face the challenge and to power on in life, conquer what he's able to conquer. A person who lives like this, uva'u alecha kol habrachos. But now listen to something wild that the Orach Chaim says. The Orach Chaim ponders on the word of the pasuk, v'hisi gucha, which means, and the brachas will reach you. And it's seemingly a very superfluous word in the pasuk, because the pasuk says, uva'u alecha kol habrachos. The brachas will come to you if you lead the life of Torah mitzvahs. Why does the pasuk emphasize v'hisi gucha, and they will reach you? The Orach Chaim says, from the Yalkut Raveni Parsha Vayikra, that sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Berachamav Ha'amrubim, will want to give someone a good thing. He will want to turn to someone and give him the bracha. Like a decision that's already been made by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Elo shebehigas ha'toivahu lemato yishpatu sanhedrin mailo im ro'ui oy einoi ro'ui. At this point, says the Orach Chaim, it's possible for the powers that be, the Sanhedrin Maila, whoever this is, the Beis Din Shel Maila, to step in and to override HaKadosh Baruch Hu's decision, which was to give this guy a bracha. And the Beis Din Shel Maila will say, well, hang on a second, is he really befitting for such a bracha? And they can pause and they can hold back the bracha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has decided to bring a person. This happens, says the Orach Chaim. This is why, says the Orach Chaim, it says in the Pasuk V'hisigucha, you know why? Shezehu ikar havtocha shelo yisakvu b'botei dinim shel amato. The havtocha of this pasuk is that these brachas will come to a person. A person will be able to live a gebenchte life of Torah if they keep Torah mitzvahs, and no one will be able to stop that. No one will be able to prevent that. The Beis Din Shel Maila, the koiches that normally mix in, says Orach Chaim, they won't be able to. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, I guarantee that you will get these brachas and nothing will get in the way. Why? What's the big deal? What have we done? What you've done is you've committed and you're trying to live a life of Torah and mitzvahs. That's enough. I think that's very encouraging and very empowering. So let's just summarize the point that we just made, and then I'm going to leave you with one final smashing vort. We said just now, the second half of the shir, that the brachas come because we keep Torah and mitzvahs. Don't underestimate the value of that commitment. Like those people in the Medrash, lo yasinu dova, ela kashem she'einu mudnasis. We didn't do anything major, we didn't do anything special. You did. You said Krishma, you davened, you did the mitzvahs hayom, you did what you had to do every day, trying to seek to do Ratzon Hashem. That's gewaldig, and that's a cause for bracha. And the second thing we said is we went through 2 pointers of the Malbim that will deepen this experience for us. Number one, a person should be accustomed to have a bit of a growth mindset. Try and keep moving. Try and see what the next boundary is that you can smash through. How can you do better? Obviously, at the same time as recognizing the value of what you've already done. And secondly, don't ever give up and don't flag in the face of difficulty. And by having this commitment to Torah mitzvahs, even when it's difficult, even with the areas that is difficult, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, says Orach Chaim, will guarantee us bracha, and nothing will be able to stop that. Now listen to this. We're approaching Slichas Mitzvah Hashem and Yom L'Roim, and these are days of tefillah. And everybody's bakosha, everybody's will, everybody's desire is for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to listen to their tefillahs. Says the Medrash Tehillim, Kuf Tetzayin Beis. Omar lahen HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I'm quoting only part of it. Atem misavim she'eshmat tfilaschem. You want me to listen to your tefillah, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Va'af ani mevakesh she'tishma'u li. I ask of you, says Hashem, that you should listen to me. And he quotes the pasuk in this week's that we've been working on. V'haya im shomaya tishma b'koil Hashem elokecha. Says the Medrash that the Rebbe Shalom says, im shomata tiyeh nishmas. If you listen to me, says the Medrash, I will listen to you. And he quotes the pasuk in Yeshaya, Oz tikra Hashem yana, you will call out to Hashem and Hashem will answer. If we put effort into keeping Torah and mitzvahs, if we put effort, like the Malbim recommended, we try and deepen our relationship and our commitment to Torah mitzvahs to the best of our ability. But the key point is, if we keep up our daily grind of Torah and mitzvahs in the face of difficulty, in the face of challenge, we stick to our commitments and we keep going with it, we will be zocheh to brachas. We won't just be zocheh to the brachas of Avo Alecha Al Kol HaBrachas, like the pasuk says. We won't just be zocheh to those brachas in the face of any other Beis Din who's going to try and get away from us, like Orach Chaim says in Sigucha. But it says the Medrash Tehillim will be zocheh that our tefillas will be answered as well. Thus, that is the power of a Yid. That is the power of Shmiras HaTorah v'Mitzvahs. Im Shamato Tia Nishmas. If you listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you seek to live a life of fulfilling HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will, Hashem will listen to you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu help us all. Give us the clarity and the energy that we should know how we could improve. We can better our commitment to Torah mitzvahs so that we can really be Shomrei Torah mitzvahs in a way that pleases HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And through that, we'll be Zocheh to all the brachas, and we'll be Zocheh HaKadosh Baruch Hu answering all our tefillas.